it's part of the human condition to tell stories. And it's how we create societies and how we create communities within societies. And it's through telling each other stories that we find something cohesive and that we challenge ourselves to be better humans and all of that stuff. And that's what I have grown up believing that theatre is. That's what it's about.
Welcome to the Reb Chat, where we share conversations with creative entrepreneurs. I'm Kathy, your host. We bring you inspiring stories from founders and innovators in both profit and not-for-profit sectors. Our guests share their journeys and creative processes from the world of art and theatre to groundbreaking business ideas. Welcome to the Reb Chat, and I'm so pleased to have Flloyd Kennedy with me today, a multi-talented Australian artist whose career spans acting, directing, writing, and podcasting. And if that wasn't enough, she's written poetry all her life and published poetry books too. Flloyd has trained and worked across the globe, from Australia to the UK, the USA, and Russia, embodying roles in theatre, cabaret, folk music, and now podcasting with her creation, Am I Old Yet? This makes her a fantastic guest for our discussion on the intersection of art and creative entrepreneurship. Flloyd, it's a pleasure to have you with us here today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Kathy. It's lovely to be here.
It really is. I've always wanted to talk to you about, not just about the output of what you do, which is prolific, by the way. When I've looked at your websites and gone, how on earth has this woman poured so much work in all of your career, but also how you've developed the process of content creation, of keeping going, and some of the thoughts you've learned along the way. So I think our listeners can really be guided by your rich experience. So I'd really like to start at the beginning about some of your early influences and your journey from Australia. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was born in Australia. I didn't leave until I was 21, I think, about to turn 22 when I left. And my creative journey, the story goes that when I was 18 months old and one of my aunts had had a terrible car accident, she was laid up in hospital in a cast from the waist to her feet, and I was plonked on the bed to entertain her while my mother and my other aunt went off for a coffee. And the nurses had to come and complain because Auntie Ellie and I were singing a duet of Anything You Can Do, I Can Do Better at the tops of our voices. I have no recollection of this. But what I do have a recollection of as a very small child was just of always making things up. I can remember, when I was 6, we moved to where another one of my aunts ran a dancing school. She'd been a professional dancer for many years. And I was put into the classes and I just fell in love with performing. Absolutely loved it. But a strange thing happened. After a couple of years, I was rehearsing with my dance partner, Dolores de Goras. I was a short, tubby, blonde girl. Dolores was the same age as me. She was a very tall, slim, black-haired, Mediterranean-looking girl with a name like Dolores de Goras. And we were performing on Mother Kelly's doorstep. And suddenly my voice seemed to crack in the middle. And I was appalled. I thought my voice is broken. But it's only boys' voices who break. What's going on? Oh, why is that happening? And that was the beginning of my absolute fascination with all things voice. I just spent the rest of my life after that just checking out how do people do that with their voices. And I did speech and drama at school, or art of speech, as we called it back in the day, which was terribly formal. And it was all about standing very still and reciting and saying the lines the way you were told how to say them. So it wasn't terribly creative. But it did give me an absolute passion for language and how to break down a script, how to understand how the words got to mean what they meant. It wasn't until I was, then it was in my late teens, I moved to Brisbane and joined two of the local pro-am companies. There was no actual professional theatre in Brisbane at that point, except touring companies. But there were three companies that were run by professional people who'd worked in the profession, but on an amateur basis. So I got to work for 3 years with these fabulous performers and directors while I was, one of the juniors playing small roles and helping out with the lighting, the sound, the costume design, everything. You did everything. So it was a fabulous grounding in repertory theatre, because that's how they ran them in seasons.
You did that for 3 years, am I correct?
I did that for 3 years, yes, until I decided that I had to do what all young Aussies did back in those days in the 60s. You got on a boat and you traveled to Europe, especially to London, because London was Mecca for theatre. And if you wanted to make it in theatre in Australia, you had to have been to London, and then they would take you seriously.
Okay, so we've taken you from those early roots of the performance, of
Yeah.
the voice and the fascination with breaking down the language into that rep theatre, where I'm sure there was some incredible learning and grounding in the craft.
Absolutely, yes.
And then the bright lights of London called you.
Yes.
Did you take a plane or a boat over?
It was a boat. It was the last time you could travel by boat cheaper than you could fly.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
So there you are in London, a young woman.
There I was in London.
And what happened then?
Well, didn't realize what it was until years later. I had a real case of culture shock, because just as, English people who go to Australia, they think it's going to be like England with sunshine, and it's not. When I got to England thinking it would be like Australia with rain, and it is, but it's certainly not. And the thing that really kind of devastated me in a way was growing up thinking, with the cultural cringe, that everything that was done somewhere else was better than we did it in Australia. Hence, you had to go to London to prove yourself. I thought these theatre that we were making in Brisbane can't have been all that good because it was just us doing it. And I got to London and I hit the London theatre scene, and I went to shows 2-3 times a week. And it wasn't better than what we were doing. And how did I know that? What was wrong with me that I thought, but gosh, I think, when we did such and such a production, it was much more exciting than this. What is all this naff sort of standing around, where are my trousers, the farces that were very good. But I wanted something more from theatre than farcical nonsense, pure entertainment. I always somehow wanted more. I felt it was more important than that. And that's been a huge theme throughout my life.
Okay.
That humans, it's part of the human condition to tell stories. And it's how we create societies and how we create communities within societies. And it's through telling each other stories that we find something cohesive, and that we challenge ourselves to be better humans, and all of that stuff. And that's what I have grown up believing that theatre is. That's what it's about.
Interesting. So it's challenging assumptions about our own reality and our cultural reality. That culture shock from Brisbane to London, thinking it will be more of the same, but it was entirely different and not better as you expected.
Not necessarily. I mean, the RSC and the National that's where it was happening for me. I remember I saw Olivier performing his Othello.
Wow.
I was standing up in the gods and I'm leaning over the thing and watching and listening, and tears pouring down my face, just going, it's really him,
A legend.
Yeah. And then going to the RSC, where we had Glenda Jackson doing an amazing production called US. It was a partly devised piece of work, anti-Vietnam War thing. and it was stunning. It was just stunning. It's like, yes, that's what theatre's for.
So you were there fermenting
Yes.
your own path, which is making things up. That seems to be a natural performer. You know, that was in your DNA, and also really analyzing that culture, and then thinking it could be better because I can see those influences.
Mm.
And I don't know how long you stayed in London, but I do know that Scotland played a big part in your journey.
Yes, well, I'd been in London about 6 months when I went to a party, and there were these three Scots lads
Mhm.
hanging around holding up the wall with pints in their hands and not asking us to dance. So I went up to them and said, is one of you going to ask me to dance, or do I have to ask you? And there were one of them just moved away, and the other two looked at each other and went, you? No, you, no, you go. So, so the one who agreed to dance with me, I married him and we moved to Scotland.
Oh, wow. That is an amazing
Yeah.
synchronicity. So your dance, but I'm sure there was a deeper connection than that because you married.
Well, there was, and it was his voice. We spent most of the rest of the evening. I think we left at about 4 o'clock in the morning, but we spent most of our time sitting in a snug in a corner of one of the rooms, just talking.
Mm.
And he had this beautiful, deep Scots accent that just filled my ears. Yeah.
So 6 months in the UK,
Mm,
this almost chance meeting, which
mm.
turned into a marriage. And did
Yes.
that precipitate the journey up to Scotland then to the
Yes,
okay?
we were married and had number one son when we had the opportunity to buy a property on the Isle of Tiree, which is where
Mm.
his family all came from, and he was desperate to move there and live there and become a novelist. And we had the opportunity to buy this uh, building, so we did, and we drove up with the baby in the carry cot on the back seat, and our box of possessions in a, packed in a case being shipped up, which didn't arrive until about 3 months after we'd got there. An empty house. Yes, but we opened a cafe and a shop, and had a go at that for 3 years. It wasn't a huge success. I was doing all the cooking, and he was doing all the drinking, and number two baby
Okay.
arrived, and then there was a stupid accident, and the building was burnt down, and we almost went bankrupt.
Oh,
So
wow.
we had to find somewhere else, and somewhere else turned out to be Nigeria, where my husband could actually earn some good
Oh,
money.
wow.
So we were there for 4 years.
So Brisbane, London, Scotland, and now we're in Nigeria.
Now we're in Lagos. Yeah,
In Lagos. Well, wow, talk about a cultural journey
I know.
of really opening up how different worlds can be. So there you are in Nigeria, an artist, um, a young mother with your husband, a novelist.
Yeah.
Did the artistic journey take root in Nigeria? What did you learn there? Did you create stuff in Nigeria, or was it all about the family in those years? So I'm just curious to know.
No, it wasn't all. It was mostly
Mhm.
about the family. But uh, there was a there were two expatriate groups, mostly English people, but other nationalities mixed in. One was the Ikoyi singers, who did an opera called Amal and the Night Visitors. And I have always sung and always believed that I
Mhm.
wasn't a good singer because I don't have a conventional type of voice, and you're not allowed to think you're any good if you grew up in my family.
Mm.
So that was my mother's way of trying to protect me from myself. Not don't get above yourself. But so in Amal and the Night Visitors, I was away when they cast it. And when I came back, I found myself in the chorus. And at one point, the girl who was singing the lead role, which is this teenage boy called Amal, so high treble, she was away, and the woman who was leading it said, Floyd, come on, you know this, you can sing it. And I went, really? Well, I know it, but I can't sing it. She said, go on, just sing it. And I did, and I had all the high notes there, and I never considered myself a soprano. I like to sing down here, Um, and she said, you would have got the role if you'd been here. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then there was the Ikoyi Players, which was the Amateur
Mhm.
Dramatic Society. And they were looking for a director. And I thought, well, I've never directed, but I know how I would like to direct. So that was my first opportunity to actually have a go at directing workshop
Wow.
style. And they hated it. I mean, they were a very traditional bunch who were used to learn your lines before the first rehearsal, and the director will tell you where to stand and when to raise your hand. And I was saying, no, just move around, just have a chat, just improv. Oh, God,
So,
they
so they were
hated it
used to a
so
much
much.
more
But
uh, structured hierarchical system. Yeah.
traditional amdram culture, which was pretty much how we'd been directed in Brisbane. And I
Mm.
hadn't liked that. I'd found I enjoyed the rehearsals, but then the rule was once you open, you have to do it the same way
Mm.
all the time. It was quite rigid. But I was noticing that the senior actors, the pros, they weren't doing that. But I was a good girl and I always did what I was told. And I thought there
Mm.
must be a better way. So I was, as you probably gathered, I was gradually realizing that being a good girl and doing what you're told isn't actually what they mean necessarily. Some of them do, obviously, directors. But I wanted to be the kind of director that allowed the cast to be more creative, to have more input, and to make it their own, not me just laying down the law,
The law and all the law.
laying down the
So,
law.
so I mean, we're
Yes.
kind of journeying towards
Yeah.
your creative process anyway. So it's really good that you're talking about this.
Mm.
So there is
Yeah.
this almost collaboration with with the people you're working with, and the trust that they have something to also bring to the party. And that was diverging away from being, and I put quote unquote, a good girl and following the way things are done and doing it
Yes.
in the way that you
Yeah.
felt natural. So in Nigeria,
Yeah.
where they hated it,
Yeah.
did there come a chance where they went, oh, this is
Mm.
quite cool? Was there a kind of a shift?
Oh, yes. As soon as it got in front of an audience and the audience loved it, it was, oh, Floyd seems to have known what she was doing.
In Nigeria, was it theatre mainly that you concentrated on, or there other endeavors as well?
Oh gosh, now you're taking me back. It was crafts, it was making, it was sewing. It was all the other mothers of the children in the play school,
Mm-hmm.
play groups, the nursery groups. Um, we would meet up for coffee in one or another's house with the children playing
Mm.
around, after nursery. We'd go to somebody's house after lunch and kind of take turns, and somebody would be experimenting with, I don't know, macrame. And so we'd all buy the book. And then we'd go out and we'd buy the string, and then we'd all make macrame, until we got fed up with that. And then it would be black work, needlework, where you're doing like cross stitch in black thread against, on linen, it was all of this stuff. Tie dye, that was another one.
Such a broad stretch of creativity. The other theme that seems to be is that you love working in community, whatever that community is, it is. So creating things not only by yourself, but with other people and learning from the other communities.
Yes.
From Nigeria, I think you said a few years in Nigeria, and then where was the next destination in your world tour?
The next destination was back to Glasgow.
Okay.
Glasgow this time, where I can't remember exactly how it came about, but I found myself helping run workshops for disadvantaged children, youth, or youth, young people from disadvantaged areas.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there was a name for it, areas of urban disadvantage or something like that. It was an official term. It was a Glasgow Theatre Workshop. And so I found myself running workshops with them. And that's where I met Jill. And Jill was the secretary to Tom Fleming, who was the director of what was then the newly formed Scottish Theatre Company, different setup to what they have now. But Tom Fleming was a great Scots actor, director. He used to be the voice of the, royal events, doing the announcer voice, wonderful voice. And he was looking for two boys to play young Macduff and Fleance in a production of Macbeth. And Jill, whom I'd met through Glasgow Theatre Workshop, knew that I had two sons. I had Ian, who was 11, and Roddy, who was 9. And so I went home and said to the boys, would you like to be involved in a production of Shakespeare? And we had quite recently seen some Shakespearean play on the TV, and we'd all sat and watched it, and they'd been quite enthralled. And Ian immediately said, oh, yes, please. And Roddy, who was quite a reserved child, said, how many people would be watching? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, the Theatre Royal audience is about 1,500. And he said, no, I don't do that. And I said, okay. So by that stage, I was running, I had a part-time job running workshops for youth groups in Port Glasgow, which is just outside of Glasgow, another area of urban disenchantment, whatever it is, huge unemployment. Mm. And I was running a whole stream I had 5 workshops in different suburbs with kids. And there was a 12-year-old boy in one of the groups, and I think he'd be up for it. So I took him along, and Tom auditioned him and Ian. And so Stephen got to play Fleance. He went on to become a professional actor. And Ian played young Macduff, and I got the job as nanny on the tour with the children.
Wow, wonderful. So I can see there's also spotting potential in people, even in your own family. Uh-huh. So you can see something in somebody. And then there's the open invitation, would you like to do this? So, and some people say yes, and some people say no. Yes. So there you are doing workshops. What in timeline, which decade are we in now?
We're in the 80s now, okay, early 80s, 81 to about 85, I think, or 84. I was doing that. The other upshot of that was that Jill also got me involved in the wardrobe department at the King's Theatre in Glasgow for the run of their pantomimes. So that would be three months' work, where you went in before rehearsals to prepare the costumes, and then you were appointed as a dresser. I was a dresser for the boy dancers the first year, I think. And the second year I was the boy dancers and Gregor Fisher as well, personal dresser to him. And standing backstage and with the other dressers, we discovered that we all had a yearning to actually perform ourselves. Mm. So 3 of us formed ourselves into a little cabaret troupe and took ourselves to Edinburgh Fringe.
So that's where it came from. I did wonder, because I'm thinking, well, it's quite interesting. So being on both sides of, say, the backstage and the front stage, and being, you like being a performer. And okay, cabaret, and wanted to get there. So we're still in
standing in the wings and thinking, I could do that.
Yeah.
Just typical actor.
Fascinating. So the cabaret group.
Yes.
How many were involved in this?
3 on stage and a piano player, who was the most fabulous pianist. He was also a lyric tenor, who was at that time, he was studying at the Royal Scottish Conservatory. But he played the piano like an angel.
Did you write the material, Flloyd, or did you collaborate?
We wrote the sketches. My husband wrote some sketches for us. We wrote our own. We stole songs. We didn't bother getting permission. weren't really it was sussed enough. But I just remember, because Sondheim, you've got to go through so many hoops to sing Sondheim. But David insisted that I sing this song. It's the little things you do together, screw together, rue together, that make perfect relationships. Something about marriage. Anyway, it's a great song. It's like a patter song. And it's in the key of D, which meant I had to sing a high D above middle, way above middle C. And I just kept saying, David, you've got to take it down. I don't sing up there. He said, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
Ah, so he discovered another plane
Mm.
to where your voice could go.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's interesting,
yeah,
isn't it? You said, I don't. And
mm,
he said, yes, you
yeah.
do. And could you?
Well, I did, because eventually I thought if he's prepared to go in public with me sounding like this, with my squeaky voice, as I thought, it can't be that bad. But what I also did was I heard him one day coming in saying, oh, I'm exhausted. I've just been in a singing lesson. My ribs are hurting. And I said, oh, who are you studying with? And he told me she was a very famous Scottish soprano, Patricia Cochrane? No. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, I contacted her and said, I'm a folk singer. Can I get some lessons? And she said, well, come and we'll see. So I went along and she said, I know nothing about folk singing. All I know is what I do. I'll show you how to do what I do, and then we'll see if it works for you. And so that was my first ever singing lessons, classical training. I forgot to mention that Daniil, my husband, was a traditional Scots folk singer. And we'd been folk singing in London. We even set up our own club at one point. Yeah.
So you've got these extra influences. And it's interesting that it's almost like you've attracted these things into your life by, I think there's an element of risk taking, an element of actually courage to say, I'm going to do something I haven't done before. And that, do you think that's necessary in the, well, it sounds like a loaded question, but to be a performer, you can stay in your lane and do what you do, or yours seems to be one of constantly expansion and trying different things and integrating it into your creative life. So I'm looking at the quality there, and the quality is a combination of openness, risk taking, and also courage to do it, because it could fall flat on its face. Like saying, well, what's she doing that for? Because she's meant to be a folk singer. In fact, she's not meant to be a singer at all. She's meant to be whatever you're meant to be. And this is interesting, isn't it? The boxes that society can put us in and the boxes that we put us in.
Do you know, I was never really aware of these boxes until I was in Scotland and I got an agent who said, don't put on your CV that you direct and you sing, just put you act. Because if they think if you do these other things that you're sort of, not all that good at anything. And I thought, whatever happened to versatility? Because that had been my modus operandi all my life, If you remember, I started off singing with Auntie Ellie and I was making puppets, when someone gave me a book on, puppet theatre. So my mother helped me to make the hand puppet with the toilet roll for the head. And my dad built me a little puppet theatre, when I was about 9. That was Christmas. And then almost every role that I was cast, whether in Rabaul where we lived, or when I left school, or when I was in Brisbane, they would have me singing, and every time I would say, but I don't sing. They would say, well, you're singing now. And so I hated it because I really didn't think I was a singer.
Through singing, did you grow to love singing, Flloyd, eventually?
Oh, I always loved doing it.
Okay.
But I didn't think I was good at it.
Okay.
And so other people should have been doing it because other people had beautiful voices and consistency in their voices. And I never had that. And I always had this break in my voice, as I thought. It's just everyone's got different registers that no one would explain it to me until eventually I found out technically what it is. And so I would be, I would be required to sing something for this thing. And I would just think, well, you're just going to get this voice. That's all I've got. And, get on with it. But I never, it's the difference. I know this sounds silly, but language is everything. It's the difference between being what we consider to be in our modern society, a singer who sounds beautiful all the time, or someone who sings.
I love that. And I think this is it, isn't it? I mean, think to someone who sings and does plenty of other things as well. So is this almost like, I had a conversation with somebody else about this, being forced almost into a niche and being known for one thing, where you're multi-talented and very versatile, and maybe a generalist creative.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes we think, oh, we better put ourselves in a niche, and that might be, but really your spirit is, I'm a generalist. I want to try lots of different things.
Yes.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting. So,
But I think it's different personalities too. I mean, I know people who just want to do acting. They just want to do straight acting. They don't
absolutely,
even want
Floyd.
to
And I
do
think, and
comedy,
that's
you know?
coming
And
back
if
to
that's your
working with
bag,
other
then
people. We
great,
know that there are people
you
who are
know?
very versatile, want to take risks, want to kind of
Mm,
push their own boundaries about what they can do and what they can't do. And there are other people who really go deeply vertical. It's like, this is what I do. I just want
mm,
to get brilliant at doing this thing. And you
yeah,
and I have worked with all sorts of people in our careers.
yeah,
So
yeah,
your process for working and collaborating
mm,
with vastly different people, and this is an entrepreneurial skill, I believe, because growing your network, growing your
mm.
community, keeping in touch with people, we all have a way of doing that. So what's your process? And we'll talk about the podcast as well, because that's another, where you are at the moment. But through your
Mm,
experience of working with and collaborating, I've seen that,
mm,
looking at your website and through our discussions, it's been a key feature
mm,
of you inviting people in to come on, let's try this. What's your
mm.
process?
Yes, yes. Well, that is my process. And I settled
Mm-hmm,
into it, had it
mm-hmm,
validated by one
mm-hmm.
particular experience. It was 1989, and a Russian theatre company came to Glasgow, and I managed to blag a free ticket to go along and see it. And I sat in the auditorium watching this company perform,
Wow.
and my heart absolutely stopped. And
Okay.
it said, I knew it could be this good. And then in 1991, that theatre company came to Scotland to do a 2-week residential workshop. And I managed to get a place in that, and I got to see how that director worked and got to work with his vocal coach and his movement coach. And 15 members of the company, as well as 26 participants from all around the world. And I got to observe and experience the difference in the way of working that that particular
Mm-hmm.
company had. It was very much Stanislavski based, but evolved, an evolved version of Stanislavski's ideas. The guy who directed it, Lev Dodin, is a megalomaniac, but put that aside, he knows how to get fantastic work from his company. And how they work is that they take a script or they take a book, a novel. And he says to them, go away up country to the place we've booked for you and play with this text for 3 weeks, and I'll come and see what you've got. And the actors get together and they improvise, they devise, they mess about. They come up with something like a 12-hour performance to present to
Okay.
him. And then he goes away and scripts it down. And then they go into
Okay.
rehearsal where they continue to play with it until he thinks it's ready to put in front of an audience. That could take 6 months, it could take 3 years.
So there's this distillation process throughout
Yes,
that of
yes,
letting the actors really embody the words instead of
yes,
just saying words, but this is a
yeah.
completely different process.
It's a
And
completely different process.
and how much did that influence what you do now?
Well, that was it. Yeah, I came back from that experience, and I invited a number of people that I knew in Glasgow that we had been doing workshops together,
Mm-hmm.
workshopping each other for a couple of years. And I had a script that a fabulous Australian play called The Golden Age by Louis Naura. And I was trying to cut this long story short, I sent a copy of the script to one at a time of these people saying, have a look at this script and tell me if you'd like to come and play with it. And we'll just workshop it. We'll just have some fun with it. And without exception, that pretty much everything that came back was a version of, yes, Flloyd, you're mad. When do we start? Because it's an amazing text. And then I thought I knew the guy slightly who was general manager of Tramway Theatre at the time. And I said, you've got a big rehearsal room there. Any chance we could just use it to come in and workshop? He said, sure. And I said, and I know you love doing lighting design. Would you like to be our production manager? He read the script and said, you're mad, count me in.
So you had all of these people excited by the whatever interpretation of mad means to them. But you were the leader in this, and that's another thing that I've
well, I considered myself to be the person who just got it to happen.
But that is leadership, isn't it?
I didn't know that, and I didn't think of it that way. And it wasn't until because how we worked was that we'd come together, we'd do some workshoppy group stuff for, just ensembling. And then people would go off with their scripts in their scenes to work in 2s and 3s, and maybe invite somebody else to come in and look at what they were doing. And it started to happen that I started being invited to come and sit in on people's scenes quite a lot. And then I started overhearing them saying, our director, Flloyd, and I said, what the? I am not a director. Directors are horrible people who just stand around telling you what to do. And I don't do that. And they said, no, but what you're doing is directing. I mean, no, I would not have it. I said, I'm a facilitator. Yeah, how about that? I thought I'd invented it, but of course I hadn't. And then I had a good friend, Liz Carruthers, who was a director, ran a venue. And she suddenly, after we'd been just playing for about 3 months, she said, Flloyd, the theatre's dark for a week at the end of May. Do you want it? Come and put it on. So we did. And it was an amazing experience for all of us. We all came away from that feeling like we'd moved into another plane of existence.
And when you say an amazing experience for all of you, and maybe you didn't know it at the time, but do you think that was actually what you wanted to create in your leadership style? Because so many different things. It's like, and it was not just for you to say, look what I did, but it was like all of us had an amazing experience.
It was absolutely what I wanted. Do you know, the best comment I had was somebody in the audience who came up to me one night afterwards up in the bar, and he said how much he loved it and all of that. And he said, I'll tell you how much I liked it. I couldn't see any directing. I went, yes.
It's almost as though that it was there, but it was so low key because it was all about the collaboration and the expression.
Absolutely.
And there was a unity within it.
Yes.
That one of your skills is also creating the space for people. And that's, creating space, not just saying you create a space, but actually creating.
Sometimes whether they want it or not.
Whether they want it or not. Which moves me
pushback.
Which moves me on to, as we know, as an artist, a creator, an entrepreneur, they're building something. That is really what at the heart of it. They're building, it could be a product, it could be a service, it could be a performance. We sell tickets, people come, they like it, they don't like it. But there's an entrepreneurial flair to both triumph and disaster. Okay. So it was a triumph. The people loved it. Oh, it absolutely panned out. We had the worst comments and there's deflation. So there's this way of dealing with those setbacks, those deep challenges, maybe not getting the response that we intended. I'd like to know how you've dealt with that, Flloyd, in your career.
Well, I've dealt with it in the same way that I've dealt with any kind of setback in the past, by running away. I don't recommend it. Not thinking I'm running away, thinking I'm running to, because that's not working, so I'll go somewhere else. So the the thing that we ran that company for 4 or 5 years,
Mhm.
and the worst review comment that we had for our production of Iphigenia in Taurus was one of the reviewers, Scotsman I think it was, who said lots of lovely things and also some plinky plonky music, and I thought I'll take that.
It's a plinky plonky music.
Yeah.
Was it down by faint praise?
Down by faint praise, yeah.
So you said,
Um,
I just wanted to ask you, you
yeah.
said by running away from it.
Yes. Oh, I did a huge runaway because
Okay.
after Iphigenia, which was a critical success, but we didn't get big audiences.
Okay.
Nobody, don't put on a play that no one can pronounce the name of it. It doesn't encourage people to come and see. And so when we applied for Arts Council funding the next year, this was 94, the response that we got was, I'm paraphrasing slightly, we really admire the work that you're doing, but we don't think there's a market for it. We don't think there's an audience for it in Scotland.
Okay.
And I went, well, if that's true, I'm in the wrong country.
Okay.
And so I packed up the company, handed it over to my co-director, packed all my stuff, cleared out, and headed back to Australia.
Okay.
By the time I'd left, I'd realised that it wasn't just me that the Arts Council was saying daft things to. They were slashing arts funding in Scotland was being slashed left, right, and centre. It was really going down to ticky boxes of funding. You had to do the things that they wanted you to do. There was no artistic freedom left, really. It was awful. But by that stage, I'd thought, well, I think I'll just try Australia for a while. I haven't lived there for 33 years. Let's see what it's like, sort of thing. So, yeah, I jumped ship. I went back to Australia and found it wasn't as exciting as I'd thought it was going to be. In fact, I thought I could just form a new company out there with like-minded individuals. I never did find them.
Okay.
So, I mean, I worked, I did voice coaching, I had some performance happening, and basically got by as a freelancer until I had the opportunity. Someone offered me a job to come back to the UK in 2015, so I came back.
So I'm hearing that even though you think you run away, there's an element of adaptability I'm hearing. So you think
Oh, you
this is
have
not
to.
this is not working. Well, I'm just thinking for our listeners, this adaptability is
Yes.
like some
Yeah.
people say, just keep going with the plan. If it's not
Mm,
working, double down on it. And there's a
mm.
point where you could think, actually, is the juice worth the squeeze? I wonder. And you're going
Yeah,
to take a
yeah.
different direction,
I,
which you did.
I, yeah, I took me a long, long time even after that to learn that double downing was even a thing. I
Mm.
would jump ship at the first hint of something not working out. So yeah, I don't advocate that. I think you do need to do a little bit of, let's see if we can work this out. And then, no, not worth the effort.
And it's the reflection, and I think it's the reflection of the ingredients. It could be just one or two things that needed
Mm,
adjusting. It could be
mm,
heading in the wrong direction completely. Let's
hmm.
go back to the so it's this fluidity, I think, that we
Yes,
maybe learn
yes,
to be creators and sustain the creativity. So
yeah,
I wanted to talk about your current podcast, which is
yep,
Am I Old Yet? Where you
yeah,
play multiple roles. I think sounds like you have a great deal of fun.
I
It's
do.
had loads and loads of downloads. I think you did update me on how many. Again, it's using all of your skills. So the inspiration for this, Flloyd, was what?
Well, it was something that starts after you turn 70. At different ages, people have this thought that comes to their mind, and the thought is, am I old yet? Is this me actually old yet, sort of thing? And I had actually written a poem on the topic in 2020
Uh-huh.
when we were in lockdown by then, and I'd written this poem, Am I Old Yet? Because I don't fear death, I fear pain, things like that. It was just a kind of a, stream of consciousness thingy. And then early in 2021, we were back in lockdown, and I have a dear friend, Susanna from Surbiton, who's on the board of the Corner House Theatre. It's a community theatre in Surbiton. And they wanted to put things on their website to entertain their local community. And they ran a competition, which they invited all the artists who they knew, actors, writers, etc., to create 10-minute audio sketches. And they would put the best of them up on the website for people to listen to. And I'd never done anything like that. I mean, I've written stuff all my life, on and off, different things. But anyway, I thought I was going to be one of the judges. But no, Susanna said, no, we want you to do one. Oh, all right. So I started writing, and I started writing a situation of, because we had to do, you could only work with people in your bubble, and I'm on my own. So I invented this character, my age, called Helen, but her daughter is in the bubble with her, 50-year-old Janie, who's terribly anxious, and Helen is over it. I just imagine the situation. Imagine you're very anxious daughter, Mom, don't do that, So the phone rings, and Helen's in a bad mood, so she's cranky and not really listening, and the person on the other end of the phone, it's actually her very elderly sister, and Janie's worried. And anyway, it turns out that Marion, somewhere in darkest Queensland, has gone wandering, early stages of dementia, and this lady has rescued her and taken her into her house, and then she's found my phone number and called me over here in England. And I did all of the 4 voices, and it was just so much fun.
Yeah.
Doing funny voices, and and having been a voicey person, so my voice was in pretty good nick. And and so I sent it off, and then I thought, I think I'll do another one. So I did. Then I introduced a granddaughter to come in and actually do the thing about, Helen says something about, when you're old. Oh no, Jane, Susie, the granddaughter, my favorite hobby horse at the time, was young people saying, as a young person, honestly. And so when Susie says, as a young person, Helen goes off full stream. What do you mean? I'm supposed to say, as an old person? Oh, but you're not old, Gran. All right, then what am I? If I'm not old, I'm not young, I'm not. Anyway, so that was episode 2. And then, so they wrote back and they said, yes, okay, we really like them both, but we're going to put the first one up. But they seemed to finish too soon. And I thought, well, you asked for 10 minutes. I gave you 10 minutes. You want more? So I wrote another one. And then I put them up on my website, and then I thought, I think I'll do another. Oh, isn't this what podcasters do? So then I looked into the whole podcasting thing, and then I set it up as a podcast.
So it kind of organically grew. And how many seasons have we got now of Am I Old Yet?
I've just started writing season 10.
Wow, that's prolific.
Yeah.
You're writing, you're recording. We've had conversations about recording and microphones and learning as well, Flloyd. So
absolutely,
it's always performing, but podcasting requires a lot of digital dexterity as well, learning different things. How did you find that?
Yeah. Well, again, something to give you a little bit of background. You've probably gathered I like making things. I like knowing how things work, always have done. So my day job, when I was young, was temping in an office. I was a very fast typist, and I knew how to take a typewriter apart if it didn't, if it jammed, all of that. And then electric typewriters came in, and that's fun. And then word processors came in. Oh, new toys. How does this work? So that was my modus operandi all through as the technology came in, was just, new toys. How does this work? Which buttons do you press?
So curiosity.
Curiosity, always curiosity. I kept up with the developments until I think it was Word 95, when they just, Windows 95, where they just had so much rubbish that you do not need. I was so pissed off. I went over to Apple and never looked back, because it's still a cleaner interface to work with,
Mm,
and you can ignore the stuff you don't need, although I do use Word. Um, and so, where was I going with that? To the technology.
mm,
I took myself off to university while I was back in Australia with nothing better to do. I left school when I was 15, and I was doing philosophy, because why the heck not?
why the
Because
heck not?
at my age, I thought I'm never going to get a job out of whatever I do here. Might as well do something I'm interested in. And I was doing music subjects as electives. And I then ended up with a music major as well as a philosophy major. But when I'd run out of all the music subjects that I could take as a BA student, not a BMUS, they were offering sound editing.
Okay.
And so I signed up for that, and I did 6 weeks of that course, and then I had to take work to earn money.
Mm,
But I learned how to use Audacity in the process of
brilliant.
that. And so that was useful. If I was working on a theatre production, I always did my own sound design. It's just, why not? If there's nobody else around to do it, then you have to make it happen.
I think that make it happen spirit of yours, the
Yeah.
curiosity, the adaptability,
Mm.
the grit in keeping going,
Yeah.
um, collaboration. This is the entrepreneurial skill set.
Mm.
Keeping a budget. Okay, what can we do with what we've got?
Mm.
Creating audiences, creating new things, learning constantly,
Mm.
and learning personally, but also
Mm.
professionally.
I have
So,
to
sorry,
just
you're about to say something?
I just have to throw this in before I forget to say it. But the way you are using the word entrepreneur, I've gone through stages of thinking I was an entrepreneur, and then the word has become so associated with someone who wants to make money out of it.
Well,
And
I didn't
I
intend
don't
it
do
like that.
that. I don't do
I,
that.
Oh, that's a really good thing you've said that, because I
Yeah.
think it's about creating things, and there's
Mm.
and I was going to ask you, and maybe this question comes up now. So the measurement of success for some people
Mm.
is how much money that they've created,
Yeah.
and maybe that is not your definition, but the
No.
entrepreneurial gift of um, creating whatever it is, a product, a service, whatever it is,
Mm.
or art, or
Mm.
theatre, is important to keep going. And
Mm.
the way that we measure success is it's only in financial terms, can actually suffocate the creative
Absolutely.
process. So, what's your definition of success as a
My
creator?
definition of success is if I have people who are getting something out of what I'm doing, then it's working. Then it's working.
And that you get something out of it
I'm
too.
getting something out of it, obviously. But if it's just me and there's no feedback, if there's nothing coming back, and then you start to think, oh, is this a vanity project? I'm
Mm,
kidding myself that it has to have worth to other people. For me,
mm,
that's just my own personal take on it.
yeah. And Becky said, when we started Rebcat, she said, there's no point in just writing with unless we're going to have a bit of an audience.
Mm.
And I agree with that.
Mm.
So it's sharing what you've done and
Mm.
being open to what the feedback might be.
Yes.
So with that in mind, for listening, for our audiences thinking about, well, I want to write, I want to start a show, I'd like to be a director, a performer, a singer. If you could offer some wisdom and some advice to them, what would it be?
Make something that you would enjoy yourself, because that is the only way that I know when I write a scene. That's the only way I know that I can trust that it's working. If when I read it back, it makes me smile. I actually make myself smile at some point in a 10-minute scene. I think, yeah, okay, I can put this out.
So it's something that you feel really good about, is what I'm hearing, that
Yeah,
you enjoy
yeah,
it, that you like it. That's
yes,
that's as important as much as anything else.
yeah.
I want to thank you very much for being so open, for sharing your love, your wisdom, your amazing versatility. I didn't know at least 50%. I've known you for quite a while, maybe more of your journey. And in the intention of this is always to share the wisdom, the process, and being able to take the whole of the journey, not just the good parts. I think that's what we're really interested in exploring in this series. So thank you very much, Flloyd. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You're very welcome, Kathy. Thank you.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Reb Chat. We really hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining us. Please subscribe, leave a review, and share the episode with your friends. Until then, and until the next episode, keep well and goodbye for now.